We spend hours deciding what to buy, but there's a split-second decision that can make or break a sale. Do you have the trust to hit buy now? Agentic commerce is testing that moment more than ever. And that's where PayPal comes in. With 25 years of checkouts, 400 million consumer accounts globally, and the benefit of purchase and seller protection, all of which make sure wherever a purchase starts, it ends with trust. Built for payments, growth, and agentic. PayPal Open, built for all business. Visit paypalopen.com.
Purchase and seller protections on eligible transactions only. Terms apply. See paypal.com/risk-management for details.
Liberty was never just a word. It has guided every American endeavor for the past 250 years. And now it takes form in a new way. The 2026 Semi-Quincentennial Coin and Medal Program from the United States Mint celebrates the founding ideals that have long shaped our coinage. Available 1 year only, this historic collection features new coin designs, limited edition releases, and reissues. Shop new official coins at usmint.gov/semiq. That's usmint.gov/SEMIQ. Whatever your goal, trade, show, giveaways, client gifts, or team gear, 4imprint has the promo products to match. With thousands of options, from apparel and drinkware to tech and totes, it's easy to find the right fit for your brand and budget, with standout choices at every price point. And with their 360-degree guarantee, you can be 4imprint certain your order will show up just right on time. Explore more at 4imprint.com. 4imprint for certain. Pushkin. One of my favorite podcasts is called This Week in Virology. TWIV, as it's known.
This Week in Virology, the podcast about viruses, the kind that make you sick.
On the show, a prominent virologist named Vincent Racaniello has a weekly chat with colleagues from around the country, updating their listeners on the latest news from around the world about microbes. TWIV is a very big deal. It's the Tonight Show, only for virologists. For my birthday, my friend Charles got me a TWIV t-shirt, which I'm wearing right now. TWIV has taught me more about science than almost anything I can remember. And one of their most memorable episodes is called I Love the Smell of Vaccines in the Morning.
Many people sent this to us asking our thoughts. And so there you go. We're going to give you our thoughts.
I Love the Smell of Vaccines in the Morning came out in the winter of 2022. The TWIVers wanted to talk about a study that had just been published entitled Safety, Tolerability, and Viral Kinetics During SARS-CoV-2 Human Challenge.
This is a study where you deliberately infect human volunteers under very carefully controlled conditions. They're under hospital care. They're isolated, right? You've got antivirals and monoclonals at the ready should anything happen.
The Human Challenge trial had 36 unvaccinated subjects, all between the ages of 18 and 29. All volunteers who agreed to be infected with COVID in a concentrated dose administered through the nasal cavity. The aim of the study was to figure out a crucial bit of information that was still unknown in the early days of the pandemic. How large a dose of COVID do you have to be exposed to before you get infected?
SARS-CoV-2 is not without risk. I mean, it's not Ebola, right? But it's not common cold either.
The TWIV crew went on for close to 2 hours about the study, combed through every detail, went on fascinating digressions, looked for insights and inconsistencies, and all came to the same conclusion.
I would love to have been privy to the discussions that led up to the approval of this, to see what they're thinking, right?
Yeah.
Because I have to say, I wouldn't be in favor of this, because if one person dies, that's the end of it. And that person's family is pretty upset.
Pretty upset.
So,
I would say very upset.
It's difficult because when you look at the paper and you see the results, okay, and nobody died,
Nobody even got really sick.
Yeah.
I mean, really sick. Okay. When you look at it from that point of view, you go, oh, wow, this is great.
My name is Malcolm Gladwell. You're listening to Revisionist History, my podcast about things overlooked and misunderstood. This is part 2 of our examination of the Minnesota Starvation Experiment. Part 1 was about what happened when Ancel Keys invited a group of young men to spend a year in a dingy set of rooms under the University of Minnesota football stadium. This episode is about the strange way that so many scientists think about the morality of human experiments. Like, for example, the experiment described in the TWIV episode, I Love the Smell of Vaccines in the Morning. When the crew at This Week in Virology start talking about the experiment, they sound reasonable.
There was very careful consideration given by the authors and a whole bunch of other people as to whether they turned it ethical. So no matter what we might think, okay, there are a whole bunch of people who thought that this was just fine.
That's Rich Condit of the University of Florida, another of the TWIV mainstays. Medicine is typically in the business of trying to make sick people healthy, but there's no question that you can learn more by making healthy people sick. Making healthy people sick means you can study a disease from the very beginning, as opposed to the point where the patient shows up in your office. It means you can choose exactly the kind of disease you want to study, the precise strain of virus, the exact species of bacteria. You can choose who you want to study, young people, old people, world-class marathoners, the thin, the overweight. You can compare different treatments easily and cheaply. But when you go from healthy to sick, you have a big ethical problem. The Hippocratic Oath all physicians take says, first do no harm. So how can you justify infecting healthy people with a potentially deadly virus?
If I were confronted personally with whether or not to launch or support this study, I'm not sure I would do it.
Then Brianne Barker, a virologist at Drew University, chimed in.
Yeah, I was trying to imagine if I was in this age group, would I be interested in being in the study? And my answer was absolutely not.
Mm-hmm.
The more they talked about it, the more adamant the TWIV crew became.
I would not have approved this. If I were on the committee, I would have voted no. At some point, there's going to be a young person who seems perfectly healthy, who's got something we don't know about and is going to die here. And that's what I'm concerned about. And I don't know how. I'm sure these people don't know anything we don't know. All right? I don't know how they can sleep at night.
Now, why are we spending so much time on the issue the TWIVers had with this obscure COVID study? Because the Minnesota Starvation Experiment was exactly the same kind of human challenge trial. Ancel Keys took 36 perfectly healthy young men and made them sick by starving them for months. A study like that should raise 1 million red flags, right? The Minnesota Starvation Experiment ran during the final year of the Second World War, and the subjects were all drawn from the pool of men who had refused military service, conscientious objectors. There were about 72,000 registered conscientious objectors in the United States during the Second World War. Some served in the military in non-combat roles. Others chose alternative service and were put to work fighting forest fires or staffing hospitals.
They did social work in the Deep South. They worked as orderlies in state mental health facilities. Many of them were digging ditches and grading roads and doing things that simply couldn't be defined as work of national importance.
That's the historian Sarah Tracy, who's been researching the Minnesota Starvation Experiment.
Conscientious objectors had been used as medical guinea pigs, and the U.S. civilian public service and selective service learn about this. And so there is this program that about 700 of the 12,000 conscientious objectors who were doing work of national importance, so-called work of national importance, about 700 of them enroll in medical experiments all around the country.
Among the researchers who used human guinea pigs was Ansel Keys. He's testing the effects of thiamine deficiency and needs willing test subjects for a long-term study in his lab. Why not these religious pacifists?
He writes away and he gets about 11 to do vitamin experiments. And that goes very well. He's impressed by these conscientious objectors. They're dedicated, they're committed, they're excellent research subjects.
It's from this pool of volunteers that Keys draws the first of the subjects for his starvation experiment. Now, if you want to make healthy people sick, you have to be completely sure that your subjects are acting autonomously, to use the word favored by ethicists. Meaning, did the subjects make their decision to join the experiment freely, without pressure or constraint? Were they informed of all the consequences? Did they fully understand what they were getting into? The NYU bioethicist Art Kaplan says it's hard for scientists now to find an easy answer to those questions when it comes to the starvation experiment.
Bioethicists like me have tended not to comment much on this study. It's interesting. This is such a difficult case that I think people may have steered away from it a little bit.
What makes the case so difficult is that Keys' study was conducted in the middle of a world war. His subjects were all men who had refused to fight Nazis in Europe, and because of that, they were subject to intense social pressure. People called them cowards, shirkers, morally bankrupt. Doors were slammed in their faces. And so along comes Ansel Keys, charismatic Ansel Keys. Ansel Keys with a 200-point IQ score. And he says, would you like to be part of a medical experiment that makes a difference? That erases the sin of your absence from the war? Well, of course they're going to say yes. So is that an autonomous decision? Or is that a coerced decision? In the previous episode, we heard how one of the volunteers, Sam Legg, chopped off some of his fingers with an axe in the delirium of his starvation. And then, as he lay in his hospital bed, Legg begged Ansel Keys to let him stay in the study. Remember what he told Keys? Doctor, for the rest of my life, people are going to ask me what I did during the war. This experiment is my chance to give an honorable answer to that question. That does not sound like a rational, autonomous decision. That sounds like someone who's terrified to go back to his hometown and tell everyone, I'm sorry, I've now failed my country twice. As for the second test of autonomy, did the subjects know what they were getting into? Did they fully understand the consequences of their participation? Of course not. That's the whole lesson of the testimony from the 18 volunteers in the Library of Congress. They thought they would be hungry. They didn't understand that starvation could cause them to start losing their moral bearings. Sam Legg remembered one day when he was out walking and saw a boy whiz by on his bicycle.
For a very brief, I hope it was brief, moment, I suddenly hated that boy. And that, I hate at this point to tell you this, because it doesn't speak very well for me.
Legg was a committed pacifist, a deeply spiritual man. Did he consent to that feeling when he signed up? He's still ashamed of it half a century later. This show is sponsored by BetterHelp. BetterHelp's 2026 State of Stigma report surveyed 2,000 Americans and revealed that 85% of Americans believe getting support is wise, yet 74% say society discourages people from doing so. This makes no sense, right? If you have a toothache, society doesn't discourage you from seeing a dentist. If your car breaks down, society doesn't discourage you from seeing a mechanic. If your heart is literally broken, as in not functioning, society doesn't discourage you from seeing a cardiologist. But if your spirit is broken, if you're struggling with some burden, society says you don't deserve help. I think it's time to end this self-defeating contradiction. Your spirit is not less worthy of our concern than your heart or your teeth, or your car. Which brings me back to BetterHelp. BetterHelp has quality therapists. They work according to a strict code of conduct and are fully licensed in the U.S. Don't let stigma stand in the way of support. Start therapy with BetterHelp. Sign up and get 10% off at betterhelp.com/Gladwell. That's better, HELP.com/Gladwell. Liberty was never just a word. It has guided every American endeavor for the past 250 years. And now it takes form in a new way. The 2026 Semi-Quincentennial Coin and Medal Program from the United States Mint celebrates the founding ideals that have long shaped our coinage. Available 1 year only, this historic collection features new coin designs, limited edition releases, and reissues. Shop new official coins at usmint.gov/semiq. That's usmint.gov/SEMIQ. We spend hours researching products online and deciding what to buy, but there's a split-second decision that can make or break a sale. Do you have the trust to hit the Buy Now button? The way we discover and compare things is evolving, happening faster and influenced by new forms of intelligent advice. But the underlying trust question doesn't go away. If anything, it's more important than ever. That's where PayPal comes in. For more than 25 years, they've been a trusted way to pay. And now PayPal can make the agentic era of commerce work for merchants, letting them maintain control of their brand, their customer relationships. So even as the way we shop changes, the moment that matters most still feels familiar and deeply dependable. Built for payments, growth, and agentic. PayPal Open, built for all business. Visit paypalopen.com to get started.
Purchase and seller protections on eligible transactions only. Terms apply. See paypal.com/risk-management for details.
Frankly, I was amazed or shocked by the study.
That's Zohar Lederman, a bioethicist who teaches at the Rambam Medical Campus in Israel and is one of the few people in his field to have written about the Minnesota Starvation Experiment. Lederman's big problem is with the notion that the subjects, quote-unquote, volunteered.
Israelis serve in the army as well. And we have a joke about volunteering for something. You don't volunteer in the army. You get volunteered, right? And we even have a special word for it in Hebrew.
Only in Israel is there a special word to describe the condition of volunteering without actually volunteering. Being volunteered.
So I suspect that in that environment, and again, I'm not a historian. I don't know what it was like during that time in the early 40s in the U.S., but I think we need to be wary of any assumption of voluntariness in that context.
Lederman's point is, if an experiment isn't truly voluntary, how do we justify making the subjects suffer?
If it's minimal harm, you give them diarrhea, you could say, okay, that's fine, that's nothing. But if that means that they start chewing a bubble gum all day long, or cutting off their fingers, or developing neurosis, or developing kidney failure, or two people developed kidney failure because of the study, I think at that point you should say, no, that's enough. Regardless of the potential benefits, there are some things we cannot do.
There are some things we cannot do. This is exactly where the Twivers ended up as well, in their discussion of the COVID infection study. Remember what Vincent Racconello said?
I'm sure these people don't know anything we don't know, all right? I don't know how they can sleep at night.
Now, am I happy that scientists care deeply about the ethical implications of their field? Of course. But there's something I don't quite understand about the arguments used by those who worry about human challenge trials. Listen to this exchange, for example. The TWIV crew are digging deeper and deeper into the details of the COVID infection experiment, and Rich Condit starts reading through the fine print on the study's design.
I thought it was interesting that they apparently started out by soliciting volunteers with an online application and got 27,000 responses.
Wait, the people who ran that study didn't have to trick people to get them to sign up, or go to some out-of-the-way prison and use inmates as guinea pigs. No, 27,000 people looked around them at the millions of people dying from COVID and said, I'm willing to take that risk, to make that sacrifice for society. There was a line out the door, down the block, and clear across town.
They were coming to us saying, we're in the middle of a pandemic.
I called up Andrew Catchpole, the British virologist who led the COVID infection study.
They came to us with phrases like they just wanted to do their bit for the pandemic. They felt that this was something that they could do to help. So it was really heartwarming, actually, to see that.
Now, you would think that if you were a virologist on the biggest virology podcast in the world, trying to figure out the ethics of a particular study, then this kind of information would matter. That if you're worrying about consent, then that kind of overwhelming enthusiasm should maybe make you a little less worried. So, like any loyal TWIV listener, I waited for the rest of the crew to start talking about the implications of the 27,000 volunteers. I waited and waited for the TWIVers to make sense of this, and crickets. The conversation just moved on.
All right. So after the screening, they're admitted to individual negative pressure rooms in a quarantine unit, 24-hour monitoring. They're screened for other respiratory infections using what's called a bio...
Vincent Racconello might as well have made a big W with his fingers. Whatever. The fact that 27,000 people signed up to get infected with COVID has apparently made no impression at all on these virologists. Human challenge trials are a problem to scientists. Let me read to you from a paper that appeared early in the pandemic in PNAS, Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences, which is about as prestigious as scientific journals get. The paper was written by a group of America's leading medical ethicists. They're talking about the same general question that was discussed on the TWIV episode. Should people be allowed to volunteer to be deliberately infected with COVID? In this case, they're talking about deliberate infection for testing potential COVID vaccines. They give you the experimental vaccine, then they expose you to COVID to see if it works. And the risk, of course, is that if it doesn't work, you'll get sick. Now, if you volunteer to be a COVID guinea pig in an experiment like that, I'm assuming you understand what you're getting into. But the famous ethicists, in their paper in the Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences, beg to differ. Here's what they wrote. Despite acknowledgement in consent forms that participants may not experience direct benefits from the experimental intervention, it is entirely possible that volunteers may labor under a, quote, preventive misconception that they will receive some protection from infection by their participation. That's a lot of gobbledygook, so let me translate for you. You can tell the guinea pig that this vaccine is experimental, that it hasn't been tested, that we don't know yet whether it works. But there is at least a theoretical possibility that one of those guinea pigs are going to misunderstand what's going on, and the possibility of that misapprehension means that you should never, ever try an experiment like that. I'll be honest. When I read that paper, I got a little puzzled. I mean, what would it take to make these bioethicists happy? What if we screened and vetted and sifted and sorted through every one of the people who volunteered, picking out only the select few who we thought really and truly understood what was going on? Would that make them happy? What if we only picked people with graduate degrees, or ones with IQs over 150, or ones willing to write a 10,000-word essay describing exactly what they think they're getting into? Would that make them happy? Or would they still be like, I don't know, I think it's entirely possible that volunteers may labor under a preventative misconception, so even as this pandemic rages all around us, let's not do anything at all. Now, how are they so sure of this? Did they debrief anyone who'd been part of a vaccine challenge trial? No, they didn't. I want to talk a little bit more about the men who volunteer and their motivations and how we judge them in retrospect. I brought this issue up with the bioethicist Zohar Letterman when we were discussing the Minnesota Starvation Experiment. And I'm wondering, when it comes to assessing the risks and benefits of a study like this, shouldn't what the subjects think matter? You're not interested in what the subjects think.
I think in research ethics, as bioethicists, as policymakers, we can only listen to what people want up to a certain point. When it comes to unnecessary harms, when it comes to the ethics per se of a certain policy or certain study, there comes a point when you no longer need to listen to their voices, but you just have to go on the ethics of it.
Actually, no. I think we should listen to the voices. Liberty was never just a word. It has guided every American endeavor for the past 250 years. And now it takes form in a new way. The 2026 Semi-Quincentennial Coin and Medal Program from the United States Mint celebrates the founding ideals that have long shaped our coinage. Available 1 year only, this historic collection features new coin designs, limited edition releases, and reissues. Shop new official coins at usmint.gov/semiq. That's usmint.gov/SEMIQ. We spend hours researching products online and deciding what to buy, but there's a split-second decision that can make or break a sale. Do you have the trust to hit the Buy Now button? The way we discover and compare things is evolving, happening faster and influenced by new forms of intelligent advice. But the underlying trust question doesn't go away. If anything, it's more important than ever. That's where PayPal comes in. For more than 25 years, they've been a trusted way to pay. And now PayPal can make the agentic era of commerce work for merchants, letting them maintain control of their brand, their customer relationships. So even as the way we shop changes, the moment that matters most still feels familiar and deeply dependable. Built for payments, growth, and agentic. PayPal Open, built for all business. Visit paypalopen.com to get started.
Purchase and seller protections on eligible transactions only. Terms apply. See paypal.com/risk-management for details.
Whether you're planning a big event, launching a new campaign, or just stocking up on team gear, finding the right promotional products makes all the difference. That's why so many brands turn to 4imprint. They offer thousands of options, from on-trend apparel and premium drinkware to tech, totes, and giveaways, so you'll find the right fit for any audience, purpose, or budget. You can customize it all: your logo, your message, your look, and many items come with no setup charge to help you save. And if you're really watching the bottom line, you'll find standout choices at every price point so you can make a real impact while staying on budget. Plus, you'll get expert help, fast turnaround times, and their 360-degree guarantee so you can be 4imprint certain your order will arrive on time and look exactly right. Whatever your goal, 4imprint makes it easy to find your perfect promo match. Explore the possibilities today at 4imprint.com. 4imprint, for certain. "18 of the surviving members of the starvation experiment left oral histories behind about their experience. On first listen, what's striking about them is what the men went through, their pain. But if you listen more closely, you hear something else.
Why were you a conscientious objector?
Well, because when I was in high school, I became acquainted with a fellow by the name of Jesus of Nazareth, and I thought he was a pretty good guy, and I liked what he said, and I liked the way he lived and the way he handled situations with other human beings. I couldn't imagine Jesus I couldn't visualize him in the uniform of a U.S. Army or any kind of an army. It just didn't fit. And so I basically said, well, if he couldn't do it, I can't do it.
The interviewer asked everyone the same question. Why wouldn't you fight? And each man gives a version of the same answer.
Why were you a conscientious objector?
I'm not going to kill anybody, and I don't want anyone to kill me. God put us on this earth, and is the only one that has the right to take us away.
These were not people who dodged the draft out of cowardice or indifference. These were deeply moral people, from religious traditions like the Quakers or the Mennonites or the Brethren that had principled theological objections to war that go back hundreds of years.
So, on the most basic level, why were you a conscientious objector?
Well, I don't believe in killing people under any circumstances.
Conscientious objectors had many ways to serve during the war, but it becomes clear, listening to their accounts, that the issue for them was not what is the easiest or most convenient way to fulfill my wartime obligation. It was, what is the most useful way for me to help alleviate human suffering? That's why some of them volunteer to work as research subjects in Ancel Keys's lab. They want to do more than dig ditches or work as hospital orderlies. So, did they suffer during the starvation experiment? Of course they did. But that doesn't make the experiment immoral. Listen to Sam Legg again, the man who chopped off his own fingers in the delirium of malnourishment. Many decades later, this is what he has to say.
Everybody else around us is pulling down the world. We want to build it up. We want to be of service. Here was an obvious opportunity for us to be of service.
You cannot form a legitimate opinion on the ethics of what happened in Minnesota unless you're willing to listen to Sam Legg.
Now, immediately you'll say, oh, come on. You are a Jesus freak, which I will agree to. And so you were going to emulate Jesus. How well have you done it? And I say, that's none of your business. On this one issue, or this aspect of Jesus, I've done it. Never mind the rest. But that stuck. That was important to me.
When Ancel Keys retired, he was interviewed by a colleague of his at the University of Minnesota. At one point, they talk about the starvation experiment.
There's evidence coming all around at the end of the war would see a lot of problems, and people had been semi-starved, especially in northern countries. So I went to the Surgeon General's office and mentioned this and said, we ought to get some evidence on this. And
what happens when people are starved and then refed?
The net result is that I, being an experimentalist, proposed we carry out an experiment. And we got the authorization to have conscientious objectors.
The net result is that I proposed that we carry out an experiment, and we got the authorization to have conscientious objectors. Ancel Keys, the great genius, wanted the world to know that the starvation experiment was his idea. But like so many other things about that study, the truth is more complicated. It goes back to Ancel Keys's earlier experiments with wartime volunteers, the experiments on vitamins.
The conscientious objectors who are working in Keys's lab realize that this is a military experiment, that in fact what he's doing is testing different rations that will have military applications. And they object to that because it has a military application.
Sarah Tracy, the historian writing a biography of Keys, when she was researching her book, she stumbled across correspondence among Keys's volunteers in the early years of the war. The men were concerned that Keys's work was being funded by the War Department, which made them, in their own eyes, complicit in the war effort.
Another idea comes to them. Well, why don't we design our own experiment? We can design an experiment that we want to do that will be of peacetime value, and then we'll get our home churches to pay for it.
Oh, I didn't realize that.
Nobody's realized that. Nobody's realized that.
Sarah Tracy discovered that we've gotten the origin story of the starvation experiment backwards. Here's what actually happened. A group of volunteers approached the National Service Board of Religious Objectors. They make a proposal. They point out that even if peace breaks out, the war is still going to leave millions of people starving and malnourished. What if we conducted an experiment to figure out how to help them? The Service Board likes the idea and funds it. And the volunteers take that idea and the grant money to Ancel Keys.
They wanted to give relief, and if they couldn't go abroad to give relief, then they could use science to determine how that relief should be given.
Yeah, it's so beautiful. And now, so they come up with this idea.
Yeah.
And how do they phrase the idea? That we will starve ourselves and then see what study the best means of bringing ourselves back to health?
Yes. So the people who write the recruitment brochure are the conscientious objectors themselves, the vitamin conscientious objectors, right? Those religious pacifists are doing the lion's share of legwork when it comes to writing the recruitment brochure.
How did you find that out?
I found it by going to the Swarthmore College Peace Collection and combing through all their records.
The brochure said, "Will you starve that they may be better fed?" with a picture of children overturning their bowls in hopes of finding one last grain of rice.
I mean, they arrive in Key's lab, and within a month or so, they're publishing their own newsletter, right? Called, the Guinea Pig Gazette. They published the Guinea Pig Gazette, okay?
Keys published his mammoth report on the starvation experiment in 1950, years after the war was over. But the volunteers published their findings almost immediately, so it could be of use in the chaos after the war ended. A little book called Men and Hunger, a psychological manual for relief workers. The cover shows a kindly middle-aged man shaking the hand of a gaunt European against a blighted landscape. The Minnesota experiment was not something Ancel Keys did to the volunteers. It was something the volunteers chose to do to themselves. Not everyone who suffers is a victim. If we are at the point where we don't understand that fact, where we have a moral vocabulary for victimhood and none for self-sacrifice, then God help us.
If you could turn the clock back and be back in 1940s, would you participate in the study again?
Yes, without hesitation.
It was a very significant event in my life.
Right.
Very, very much so.
If you had to make the decision to participate again or not, what would you do?
Again, I enthusiastically say yes, I would. And I think humanity has been improved, and I'm glad I did it.
We knew it wasn't going to be easy. We didn't know how hard it was going to be, but we knew it was not going to be easy, and we were prepared to suffer, and we suffered. And as far as someone taking advantage of us or mistreating us, absolutely no feelings like that at all. No resentment of any kind.
Yeah.
Nothing.
And I guess if you could turn the clock back, would you participate again?
Sure. You betcha.
If you could turn the clock back, would you participate in the study again?
Yes, I'm very happy that I did. It's one of the things that I'm proud of.
Do you think you would make the same decision to participate?
Yes, I would. No regrets.
Next time on Revisionist History, the story of one more person who starved for a year so others might be fed.
He had a good life. He would say he had a good life.
And what happened to him and his family after that year ended?
But he paid a price for what he believed, and he kept paying that price his whole life.
Revisionist History is produced by Eloise Linton, Lee Mengistu, and Jacob Smith, with Tali Emlin and Harrison Vijay Choi. Our editor is Julia Barton. Our executive producer is Mia Lobel. Original scoring by Luis Guerra, mastering by Flawn Williams, and engineering by Nina Lawrence. Beth Johnson is our fact-checker. Special thanks also to Ariella Markowitz for production help on this episode. I'm Malcolm Gladwell.
마침하고 공익사를 민간지가 기생이 나를 들거든.
If you target towns and cities, it's as clear as day that there will be civilian victims. In 1945, the U.S. firebombed Tokyo, destroying a quarter of the city and killing more than 100,000 people. I wrote about this infamous bombing campaign in my audiobook, The Bomber Mafia. And one of the survivors' voices we hear is from a project called Paper City. Paper City is now out as a groundbreaking feature documentary. Director Adrian Francis explores what we choose to remember and hope to forget. To find out more, visit papercityfilm.com and follow at Paper City Tokyo on social media. Hey, Revisionist History listeners. I'm capping off this episode with a preview of a new Pushkin show that really has me hooked. It's called Death of an Artist. Death of an Artist has all the elements of a gripping story: a suspicious death, a tumultuous relationship, a murder trial, questions of morality, feminism, power imbalance, and a divided art world. On September 8th, 1985, up-and-coming artist Ana Mendieta fell from the 34th floor window of her husband and famous sculptor Carl Andre's apartment. Host Helen Molesworth asks, was Carl Andre involved? You'll revisit Anna's untimely death, the trial that followed, and both the protests and silence that have followed this story ever since. Okay, here comes a sneak peek. You can follow the story by searching for Death of an Artist wherever you get your podcasts.
It's May 1973, Iowa City. There's a damp chill in the air. We are on a sort of shabby block in front of a brick apartment building with a white door in need of a paint job and a storefront window with its blinds drawn shut. The sidewalk just in front of the door is covered in blood. And it looks like the blood might be seeping out from under the door jamb. It's a busy weekday, and as pedestrians pass the puddle of blood, they notice it and casually step around it. Eventually, a man in a green and black plaid jacket pauses and looks around, as if looking for an explanation. When none comes, he walks away. Then a well-dressed white woman uses her umbrella to poke at the bloody puddle. But after a moment or two of inspection, she also walks away. Finally, an older gentleman emerges from a nearby storefront and silently cleans up the mess. And the evidence of whatever happened is suddenly gone. And with it disappears any account of whose blood was spilled and how. The whole scene is being captured by two young women in their 20s, sisters, who sit in an old car parked nearby. One of them holds a Super 8 camera, the kind you'd make home movies with back then. The other snaps photos with a 35mm camera. They are Ana and Jacqueline Mendieta, Cuban refugees who landed in this unlikely place as children. In 1973, Ana was a first-year MFA student at the University of Iowa. She was funny, loud, outrageous, and had a take-no-prisoners vibe. And, in the way of sisters, she had roped Jacqueline into helping her make a new piece. And like many works Ana made, it would come to seem tragically prophetic in the wake of her death.
She basically staged what looked like the remnants of physical violence with what looked like blood in the doorway of a building. And I thought it was extremely powerful. For a very young artist to be doing that, and to be doing it in this small, largely white town of Iowa City, was fascinating to me.
That's Connie Butler, one of the many curators who would come to admire and study Ana Mendieta's work in the decades that followed. The photos and film the Mendieta sisters took that day would ultimately become a work of art called Moffat Building Piece.
The fact that it still exists only in these little 35mm slides, which, you have to get very close to with a loop, and it's a very intimate way of viewing these things, that implicates you as a viewer too, almost as if you are yourself looking at a crime scene.
Anna's interest in blood wasn't only meant to shock. She was keenly aware of violence and injustice. When she made the Moffat Building piece, she was investigating her own community's reaction to a brutal crime, a rape and murder that had happened on campus a few months before. Here's how she explained her inspiration.
A young woman was killed, raped and killed at Iowa in one of the dorms, and it just really freaked me out. So I did several rape performances type things at that time using my own body. I did something I believe in and that I felt I had to do.
That's not actually Ana Mendieta's voice you're hearing. That was Tania Bruguera, another artist from Cuba, who you'll hear from more later. Ana Mendieta's question was, could you make art about something so awful? And she used blood, not paint. Blood is the most essential substance of life. Could it jolt people out of their daily routines? Could blood make people pay attention? She didn't know it yet, but the Moffat Building piece was about to be her first major artwork. And in a circular way, that's kind of terrifying. The question she asked about how we react when we encounter the residue of violence, this question would haunt all of us after she died. I'm your host, Helen Molesworth, and from Pushkin Industries, Something Else, and Sony Music Entertainment, this is Death of an Artist. Episode 1, The Haunting. For my entire professional life, I've been a member of something called the Art World, an exclusive network of artists, gallery dealers, curators, collectors, and philanthropists. For 2 decades, I was lucky enough to be a museum curator, making me one of a small group of cultural insiders who determine what art we see and how we talk about it. In the museum world and in art history, there are a lot of unspoken rules about what you can say publicly and what is supposed to stay private. It turns out I wasn't that good at sticking to the script. And I guess I'm still not good at it, because I'm going to tell you Ana Mendieta's whole story, all the way to its shocking and troubling end. And much to my surprise, I discovered it's a story many of my colleagues in the art world would prefer I didn't tell. At first blush, it seemed like people didn't want me to talk about it because of who else is part of that story. Anna's husband, the famous sculptor Carl Andre. He is one of the so-called fathers of minimalism, a cultural hero to many, a revered artist with lots of connections. And he was a suspect in Anna's death. Even though Carl Andre and Ana Mendieta were a highly visible art world couple, even though something terrible happened between them the night she died, you will not read about it on a museum wall label or in most art history textbooks. Reviews of their exhibitions tend to take care of it in a sentence or two. You would not know that Mendieta's death divided the art world in 1985, and in many ways still does. I'm not the first person to try and tell this story. In fact, many of the voices you'll hear in this show are from interviews conducted by investigative journalist Robert Katz. He published a book in 1990 that remains the most comprehensive look into this art world tragedy. He spoke with dozens of Anna and Carl's friends in noisy restaurants, in parks, in busy offices. And you'll hear the voices of some art world insiders on these tapes who have since decided not to talk. Most folks don't want to discuss what happened that night. They don't want to talk about what the ramifications of that night were on the art world. They don't want to contemplate what it means when a community is torn apart by violence. And they don't want to discuss whether or not justice has been served. All these different folks not talking for all of their different reasons means that a veil of silence started to fall over this project. And I can't lie, the more silence we encountered, the more sad and frustrated I became. And the more silence we encountered, the more I wanted to talk.
We spend hours deciding what to buy, but there's a split-second decision that can make or break a sale. Do you have the trust to hit buy now? Agentic commerce is testing that moment more than ever. And that's where PayPal comes in. With 25 years of checkouts, 400 million consumer accounts globally, and the benefit of purchase and seller protection, all of which make sure wherever a purchase starts, it ends with trust. Built for payments, growth, and agentic. PayPal Open, built for all business. Visit paypalopen.com.
Purchase and seller protections on eligible transactions only. Terms apply. See paypal.com/risk-management for details.
If your finance team spends more time finding data than using it, if there's one entity here and one there and one here and one there, if scaling your business feels like starting over, you need the Intuit ERP. Intuit Enterprise Suite is the AI-native ERP solution that's powerful, painless, and proven. Learn more at intuit.com/ERP.
A BetterHelp ad. Have you ever had so many tabs open that your computer starts slowing down? 10 for work, 5 for family, 1 for that thing you've been meaning to figure out. 20 more are running quietly in the background. Life can feel like that too. According to BetterHelp's 2026 State of Stigma report, 85% of Americans say getting support is a smart thing to do. Yet 74% say society still discourages people from asking for help. And more than 3 in 4 Americans reported symptoms of anxiety or depression in the past 2 weeks. Therapy can help you sort through what's taking up space and attention. With BetterHelp, you can connect with a licensed therapist online on your schedule. You'll be matched based on your needs, and you can switch therapists anytime. In fact, 69% of BetterHelp users showed meaningful improvement in anxiety and depression. Maybe it's time to close a few tabs. Visit BetterHelp.com. That's better, HELP.com.